Hi, I'm Claire. My sister told me I'd spend my whole life mucking stalls for other people's dreams while she lived hers in a Denver penthouse. She laughed when I saved grocery money to buy riding boots. Then I handed her the deed to an 800-acre Montana ranch with 40 thoroughbreds, and her champagne glass shattered on marble tile. Sometimes the girl who gets dirt under her fingernails ends up owning the whole stable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the long driveway of Callahan Ranch just after dawn. Fog clung low to the pastures, and through it I could see the silhouettes of horses grazing, their breath making small clouds in the October chill. I'd driven 4 hours from my studio apartment in Billings, leaving at 3 in the morning because Henry had called the night before. His voice was different. Quieter. He said he needed to talk, and it couldn't wait. I thought maybe one of the horses was sick. Maybe he needed an extra pair of hands for the weekend. I didn't think beyond that. I never did when it came to Henry. He'd given me my first real job at 16, teaching me everything about bloodlines and training schedules and the kind of patience it takes to earn a horse's trust. The ranch house sat at the end of the drive, a 2-story structure with white paint peeling near the shutters and a wraparound porch that had seen better decades. Smoke curled from the chimney. I parked next to Henry's old pickup, the one with the dented tailgate and a bumper sticker that said, "My other ride has 4 legs." The front door opened before I could knock. Henry stood there in his flannel and worn jeans, coffee mug in hand, looking older than I remembered. His hair had gone completely silver since the last time I'd visited in July. His shoulders sagged just a bit more. But his eyes were still sharp, still the pale blue that could spot a lame horse from 50 yards away. "Come on in," he said, stepping aside. "Got biscuits in the oven and coffee strong enough to wake the dead." I followed him into the kitchen, the same one where I'd eaten countless breakfasts after early morning rides. The table was set for 2. He poured me a cup without asking, added cream the way I liked it, and sat down across from me. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he slid a manila folder across the table. It was thick, the edges bent from handling. I stared at it but didn't reach for it yet. Henry cleared his throat. "You remember when your sister came out here that one summer?" she asked, voice steady but laced with something I couldn't name. I nodded slowly. Victoria had visited exactly once, the summer I turned 19. She'd been 25, newly engaged to Blake, and she'd driven out in a rented convertible wearing white linen that had no business on a working ranch. She'd stayed 4 hours. Long enough to wrinkle her nose at the smell of hay and manure, long enough to tell me that playing with horses was fine for a phase but that I needed to grow up and get a real career. She'd stood in this very kitchen and laughed when Henry offered her a ride on one of the mares. "I don't do animals," she'd said, like it was beneath her. Then she'd looked at me, really looked at me in my dirt-stained jeans and borrowed boots, and said something I'd never forgotten. "Claire, you're going to spend your whole life shoveling manure for people like me. People who actually own things." Henry's jaw tightened at the memory. I could tell he was thinking about it too. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That day. She asked me how much the ranch was worth. I told her it wasn't for sale. She laughed and said everything's for sale if the price is right. Then she asked if you were going to inherit it someday." I didn't answer her, but I saw the look on her face. "She thought you were wasting your time here. Thought I was just some old man letting you hang around out of pity." "That wasn't true," I said quickly. "You gave me a job. You taught me everything." Henry nodded, his gaze dropping to the folder. "I know that. And you earned every single thing I ever gave you. You worked harder than anyone I've ever hired. You cared about these horses like they were your own. You showed up in blizzards and heat waves. You never complained. Not once." He paused, took a sip of his coffee, and when he looked up again, his eyes were glassy. "I don't have any kids, Claire. My wife passed 12 years ago. My brother moved to Arizona and we haven't spoken in a decade. This ranch, these horses, they're my legacy. And I'll be damned if I let it fall into the wrong hands. I felt my throat tighten. Henry, what are you saying? He pushed the folder closer. Open it. My hands shook as I untied the string and lifted the flap. Inside were documents. Legal papers with official seals. The first page was a property deed. My eyes scanned the lines until they landed on my name. Claire Elizabeth Donovan, sole heir and beneficiary. I looked up sharply. Henry. He held up a hand. Let me finish. You're not just inheriting the land. You're inheriting the horses. All 40 of them. Purebred thoroughbreds. Champions, every single one. I've kept records. Pedigrees. Auction results. Breeding rights. That folder has everything you need. Appraisals from last month put the total value at $18 million. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. 18 million. Henry, I can't. Yes, you can, he said firmly. And you will. Because you're the only person I trust to keep this place alive. Not as some trophy property for developers to carve up. Not as a tax write-off for some corporation. As a working ranch. A place where horses are treated with respect. Where people like you, people who love this life, can make a living. I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to make sure everything was airtight first, he said. And because your sister's been circling like a vulture. That stopped me cold. What? Henry leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. 3 months ago, she called me. Out of the blue. Said she'd heard I wasn't doing well. Asked if I needed help managing my finances. I told her I was fine. She pushed. Said she had connections to investors who could turn this place into a resort. Trail rides for tourists. Luxury cabins. A spa. I told her no. She didn't like that. A week later, a lawyer showed up at my door with an offer to buy the ranch. Low offer. Insulting, really. I sent him packing. Then your sister called again. This time she wasn't polite. She said I was being selfish. That I was sitting on a gold mine and wasting it. She said you'd never be able to handle a place like this, that you didn't have the education or the business sense. She offered to take it off my hands and give you a small payout. Enough to get you started somewhere else, she said. Like I was doing you a favor. Rage, hot and sharp, rose in my chest. She said that? Henry nodded. Word for word. I told her exactly where she could shove her offer. Then I called my lawyer and made sure every document was bulletproof. The ranch is yours, Claire. Free and clear. No loans. No liens. No loopholes for her to exploit. But there's a condition. I looked at him, my pulse hammering. What condition? He reached across the table and took my hand. His skin was rough and warm, the hand of a man who'd worked his whole life. You have to promise me you won't let her take this from you. She's going to try. People like her always do. They see something valuable and they think they're entitled to it. But you earned this. You bled for it. You gave up weekends and holidays and every spare dollar to stay close to these horses. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve it. I swallowed hard, my vision blurring. I promise. Good, he said, squeezing my hand once before letting go. Now finish your coffee. We've got 40 horses to feed and a ranch to run. And tomorrow, you're going to call your sister and tell her the good news. I almost laughed. It came out shaky and wet. Henry, she's going to lose her mind. He grinned, the first real smile I'd seen all morning. I'm counting on it. We spent the rest of the day walking the property. Henry showed me the updated records, the breeding schedules, the contracts with trainers and buyers. He introduced me to the ranch hands who'd been with him for years, told them I was the new owner. Some of them nodded like they'd been expecting it. Others looked surprised but didn't question it. By the time the sun set, painting the Montana sky in shades of amber and rose, I felt the weight of it all settle on my shoulders. Not heavy, exactly. More like a cloak I was finally ready to wear. That night, I stayed in the guest room upstairs. The same room I'd slept in during those summer weeks when I was too tired to drive home. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the ranch. The distant whinny of a horse. The creak of the barn door swinging in the wind. The hum of the old heater kicking on. I thought about Victoria. About the way she'd looked at me that summer, like I was a stray dog Henry had taken pity on. About the phone calls she'd made behind my back, trying to pry this place away from the man who'd built it with his bare hands. About the offer she'd made, framing it like charity when really it was theft. I picked up my phone and opened the last text she'd sent me. It was from 2 weeks ago. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A photo of her and Blake at some gala, both of them dressed in designer clothes, champagne flutes raised to the camera. The caption read, "Living our best life. Hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd call her. Tomorrow, I'd tell her exactly how okay I was doing. But tonight, I let myself feel it. The pride. The disbelief. The fierce, burning determination to prove that the girl who mucked stalls could run an empire. When morning came, I woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Henry was already up, moving around the kitchen like he'd done 1,000 times before. I joined him, and we ate in comfortable silence. Then he handed me a set of keys. "Main house, barn, office, equipment shed," he said. "They're yours now." I took them, the metal cold and solid in my palm. "Henry," I started, but he shook his head. "No more thank yous. Just do right by this place. That's all I've ever wanted." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. After breakfast, I walked out to the barn alone. The sun was just cresting the hills, casting long shadows across the paddocks. The horses were stirring, some already at the fence line, waiting for their morning feed. I recognized every single one. Maverick, the chestnut stallion with the white blaze. Rosie, the bay mare who'd let me braid her mane when I was 17. Thunder, the gray gelding who'd thrown me twice but still nuzzled my shoulder when I brought him apples. They were mine now. All of them. The thought was staggering. I pulled out my phone and dialed Victoria's number. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice bright and polished. "Claire, what a surprise. It's early. You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, leaning against the fence. "Better than fine, actually. I wanted to let you know something." There was a pause. Her tone shifted, became guarded. "Okay. What's up?" I took a deep breath, watching Maverick toss his head in the morning light. "Henry Callahan left me his ranch. All 800 acres. And 40 thoroughbreds worth $18 million. I'm the sole owner as of yesterday." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "You're joking." "Nope," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Completely serious. There's a deed with my name on it. Appraised value. Legal documents. The whole thing." Victoria's voice went cold. "That's impossible. Henry wouldn't." "But he did," I interrupted. "And before you ask, no, there's no room for negotiation. It's done." Another beat of silence. Then her voice came back, thin and tight. "We need to talk about this. In person." "I don't think that's necessary," I said. "Everything's already been handled. Legal. Binding. Nothing to discuss." Claire, she said, her tone sharpening, you don't know what you're doing. Running a ranch isn't like mucking stalls. There are finances. Contracts. Liability. You're going to lose everything within a year. Maybe, I said, though I didn't believe it. But it'll be mine to lose. Not yours. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. Blake's voice murmured something in the background. Then Victoria came back on, her words clipped. I'm flying out there. Tomorrow. We're going to sit down and figure this out like adults. There's nothing to figure out, I said. But you're welcome to visit. Just call ahead. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the sheer audacity of what I'd just done. I'd spent my whole life being the little sister. The one who got hand-me-down advice and pitying looks. The one who was supposed to be grateful for scraps. But standing there in the crisp Montana morning, surrounded by horses that were mine, on land that was mine, I felt something shift. I wasn't that girl anymore. And Victoria was about to find out exactly who I'd become. Victoria arrived the next afternoon in a rented SUV, her heels clicking against the gravel like a metronome of disapproval. Blake followed 2 steps behind, phone pressed to his ear, nodding at whatever conversation was more important than being present. I watched them from the porch, coffee mug in hand, as Victoria surveyed the property with the expression of someone inspecting a condemned building. Her burgundy blazer and cream slacks screamed city money, the kind that came with expectations and entitlement. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just marched straight toward me like she was preparing for battle. We need to talk, she said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Her sunglasses reflected my image back at me, distorted and small. I took a slow sip of coffee. Hello to you too. Come inside. Henry's waiting. Her jaw tightened. Henry's here? Of course he's here, I said. It's still his home. He's just not the owner anymore. I turned and walked into the house without waiting for a response. I could hear her heels scraping against the wood behind me, could feel the tension radiating off her like heat from pavement. Henry sat at the kitchen table, same spot as yesterday, hands folded in front of him. He looked calm. Almost amused. When Victoria stepped into the room, his expression didn't change. He just nodded once. Victoria. Blake. Good to see you again. Victoria pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. Blake lingered near the doorway, finally pocketing his phone. Henry, she began, her voice taking on that smooth, practiced tone she used when she wanted something. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Claire mentioned you left her the ranch, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear on what that actually means. There's no misunderstanding, Henry said evenly. I left her everything. The land. The horses. The equipment. All of it. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure you mean well, but Claire doesn't have the experience to manage something this valuable. This isn't a small operation. There are insurance costs, veterinary bills, staff salaries, legal obligations. She's never run a business. Henry leaned back in his chair. She's been running half this ranch for the past 8 years. She knows more about these horses than anyone I've ever worked with. That's different from ownership, Victoria said, her tone sharpening. Ownership means liability. Financial risk. Decision-making at a level she's never dealt with. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I care about her future. And frankly, I care about preserving what you've built here. I set my mug down on the counter, the sound loud in the quiet room. You care about preserving it, or you care about profiting from it? Victoria's head snapped toward me. Excuse me? I crossed my arms. You called Henry 3 months ago. Tried to convince him to sell. Sent a lawyer to his door with a lowball offer. Then you called back and told him I wasn't capable of handling this place. That I'd need your help. That you could give me a small payout and take over management. Her face flushed. I was trying to protect both of you. This ranch is sitting on prime real estate. Do you have any idea how much money could be made if it were developed properly? Henry's voice cut through the air like a blade. It's not being developed. It's a working ranch. It stays a working ranch. Blake finally spoke up, his tone placating. Look, nobody's saying we should tear the place down. But there are options here. Partnerships. Investment opportunities. Victoria and I have connections. We could bring in capital, expand operations, turn this into something truly profitable. It is profitable, I said. Henry's been in the black for 20 years. Blake glanced at Victoria, then back at me. Profitable on a small scale, sure. But with the right management, this could be a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Luxury trail rides. Event hosting. Breeding contracts with international buyers. You'd still be involved, obviously, but we'd handle the business side. I laughed. It came out harsher than I intended. So you want to turn it into a tourist trap and slap my name on it to make it look legitimate? That's not what I'm saying, Blake said, but his voice lacked conviction. That's exactly what you're saying, I replied. You want to strip it down, repackage it, and sell the experience to people who've never touched a horse in their lives. This isn't about horses for you. It's about revenue. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're being incredibly naive, Claire. Do you have any idea how much debt properties like this carry? How much it costs to maintain 40 horses? Feed, veterinary care, facility upkeep, it's astronomical. Without serious capital, you'll be underwater in 6 months. Henry reached into the folder on the table and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across to Victoria. No debt. Paid in full. Every building, every acre, every horse. Free and clear. Victoria snatched the paper, her eyes scanning the lines. Her expression faltered. Blake leaned over her shoulder, his face going pale. This can't be right, Victoria said, her voice thin. It's right, Henry said. And before you ask, yes, I had it independently verified. The ranch is worth $22 million total. Land, horses, infrastructure. Claire owns all of it. Outright. The room went silent. I could hear the old clock on the wall ticking, could see the muscle in Victoria's jaw working as she processed the information. Blake ran a hand through his hair, muttering something under his breath. Victoria set the paper down slowly, her fingers trembling just slightly. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of me. Of losing control. You planned this, she said quietly. You manipulated him. I didn't do anything except show up, I said. Every single day. For 8 years. While you were at galas and ski trips, I was here. Feeding horses at 5 in the morning. Cleaning stalls in 100-degree heat. Sitting with sick foals through the night. I earned this. Victoria's composure cracked. Earned it? She hissed. You think mucking stalls means you deserve millions of dollars? You think playing farmhand gives you the right to an inheritance that should have gone to family? I am family, I said, my voice steady. More than you ever were. Henry didn't owe you anything. You showed up once. Once. And you spent the entire time mocking me and pitching a sale. You don't care about this ranch. You care about what it's worth. Victoria's face went red. How dare you? How dare I? I said, my voice rising now. You told me I'd spend my whole life shoveling manure for people like you. You said I'd never own anything. You laughed at me. In this kitchen. Do you remember that? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Blake shifted uncomfortably. Henry just watched, his expression unreadable. I stepped closer. You spent years making me feel small. Like I was chasing a fantasy. Like loving horses and hard work was something to be embarrassed about. But I'm not embarrassed. I'm proud. And I'm not giving you a single acre of this place. Not now. Not ever. Victoria grabbed her purse, her movements jerky. This isn't over. I'll contest the will. I'll prove he wasn't in sound mind when he signed it. There is no will to contest, Henry said calmly. I'm not dead. This was a transfer of ownership. Legal. Witnessed. Notarized. I had 3 doctors sign off on my mental competency 2 weeks ago. Your lawyer can review the documents if you'd like, but you won't find anything actionable. Blake put a hand on Victoria's shoulder. We should go. She shook him off, glaring at me. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to lose everything, and when you do, don't come crying to me. I won't, I said. I'll be too busy running my ranch. She stormed out, Blake trailing behind her. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, my heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists. Henry let out a long breath. Well, he said, that went about as expected. I turned to look at him. Was it always going to be like this? He nodded slowly. People like her don't handle losing gracefully. She thought this place would fall into her lap someday. Now she knows it won't. That's dangerous. What do you mean? I asked. Henry stood, walking to the window. He pulled back the curtain and watched the SUV disappear down the driveway. She's going to look for weaknesses. Legal loopholes. Financial pressure. Anything she can use to force you out or discredit you. She'll hire investigators. Auditors. She'll try to prove you're unfit to manage the property. My stomach twisted. So what do I do? You do exactly what you've been doing, Henry said, turning to face me. You run this ranch better than anyone ever has. You document everything. You keep records. You build alliances. And you don't give her an inch. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why me? Really? Why not donate it to a conservancy or sell it to someone with experience? Henry walked back to the table and picked up an old photograph tucked into the folder. He handed it to me. It was faded, the corners soft from age. The image showed a young girl, maybe 9 or 10, sitting on a pony. She was beaming, dirt on her cheek, ribbons pinned to the pony's bridle. I stared at it. That's me. At the county fair. Henry nodded. You were so proud that day. That pony was half lame and ornery as hell, but you didn't care. You rode him like he was a champion. And when you won 3rd place, you cried. Not because you didn't get first. Because you were happy. I remembered that day. The sun had been brutal, and the pony, a rescue named Dusty, had tried to bite me twice. But when they called my name, I'd felt like I was flying. That's why, Henry said quietly. Because you love this life. Not the money. Not the prestige. The life. The horses. The work. The sunrise over the pastures. That's rare. And it's worth protecting. I handed the photo back, but he shook his head. Keep it. Remind yourself why you're here when things get hard. Because they will. Victoria's not going to let this go. I slipped the photo into my pocket. Then let her try. Henry smiled. That's my girl. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I walked the property with Henry, going over every detail I'd need to manage alone. He showed me the updated vet schedules, the feed suppliers he trusted, the buyers who'd been reliable over the years. He introduced me to the ranch hands again, this time making it clear I was in charge. Some of them looked uncertain. Others nodded with respect. By evening, my head was spinning with information, but I felt grounded. This was real. This was mine. That night, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The horses grazed in the distance, their forms dark against the fading light. I thought about Victoria's face when she'd seen the appraisal. The shock. The anger. The realization that she'd been outmaneuvered by the sister she'd spent years belittling. Part of me felt guilty. A small, stubborn part that still remembered the sister who'd taught me to braid my hair when I was 6. But that sister was gone. Or maybe she'd never really existed. Maybe I just wanted her to. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. The message was short. You don't deserve this. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. Then I deleted it and blocked the number. I didn't need to know if it was Victoria or Blake or someone they'd sent. It didn't matter. Because I did deserve this. I'd bled for it. I'd sacrificed for it. And I wasn't letting anyone take it away. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm I'd never experienced before. I woke before dawn each morning, the kind of early that still felt like night, and walked the property with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee. The horses knew my routine now. Maverick would be waiting at the gate, ears pricked forward. Rosie would whinny from her stall. Thunder would ignore me completely until I produced an apple, then suddenly I was his favorite person. The ranch hands respected my presence but watched me carefully, waiting to see if I'd stumble. I didn't blame them. I was 27 years old, barely old enough to rent a car without extra fees, and suddenly I was responsible for an operation worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Henry stayed on as a consultant, though he made it clear I was running the show. He'd sit in the office some mornings, reading through old breeding journals, occasionally offering advice when I got stuck on paperwork. But mostly he just watched. Observed. I think he was looking for signs that I'd crack under the pressure. Or maybe he was just making sure I knew I wasn't alone. Either way, his presence steadied me. The ranch felt less enormous when he was there, like the walls weren't quite so likely to cave in. On a Thursday morning, a silver sedan pulled up the driveway. I was in the paddock with Dr. Patricia Wells, the veterinarian who'd been servicing the ranch for 15 years. We were checking a mare who'd seemed off her feed the day before. Patricia was crouched near the horse's front leg, running her hands along the tendons, when the car door slammed. I looked up. A man in a suit stepped out, briefcase in hand, and started walking toward us with the kind of confidence that said he owned every space he entered. Patricia glanced at me. Expecting someone? Not that I know of, I said quietly. The man stopped at the fence line. Are you Claire Donovan? I am. And you are? James Kowalski. I'm an attorney representing Victoria Donovan and Blake Harrison. I've been retained to review the circumstances surrounding the transfer of this property. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. The transfer was legal and documented. There's nothing to review. Mr. Kowalski smiled thinly. I'm sure you believe that. However, my clients have concerns about undue influence and potential elder exploitation. I've been authorized to conduct a preliminary investigation. If you could direct me to Mr. Callahan, I'd appreciate it. Patricia stood slowly, brushing dirt off her jeans. She looked at me, then at the lawyer. You might want to call Thomas Brennan. I nodded. She was right. Thomas Brennan was Henry's lawyer, the man who'd handled the entire transfer. If Victoria was sending legal muscle, I needed backup. Mr. Kowalski, I said evenly, I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present. If you'd like to schedule a formal meeting, you can contact Thomas Brennan at Mountain View Law Offices. I'm happy to arrange a time that works for everyone. His smile faded. I don't need a formal meeting to ask basic questions. Actually, you do, Patricia said, stepping forward. This is private property. Ms. Donovan is the legal owner. Unless you have a warrant or a court order, you're trespassing. Mr. Kowalski's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then at Patricia, clearly recalculating his approach. Fine. I'll be in touch. He turned and walked back to his car, every step deliberate. The engine started, and he reversed down the driveway faster than was safe on gravel. Patricia let out a long breath. Well, that was fun. I leaned against the fence, my hands shaking slightly. She's actually doing it. She's trying to take this place. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. Then you fight back. And you don't fight alone. Call Thomas. Now. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Thomas answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. Claire, good to hear from you. How's the ranch? Complicated, I said. Victoria just sent a lawyer. He showed up unannounced, asked to see Henry, mentioned elder exploitation. Thomas was quiet for a moment. What's the lawyer's name? James Kowalski. I heard the sound of typing on the other end. Yeah, I know him. He's aggressive but sloppy. Likes to intimidate people into making mistakes. Did you say anything? Just that I wouldn't talk without you present. Good. Don't. Not a word. I'll file a motion to quash any investigation and request a restraining order if he shows up again. In the meantime, I need you to start documenting everything. Every decision you make. Every expense. Every interaction with staff or buyers. If Victoria's building a case, we need to be bulletproof. I swallowed hard. Thomas, can she actually win this? There was a pause. If you give her ammunition, yes. But if you run this ranch the way Henry did, if you're smart and careful and transparent, she won't have a leg to stand on. The law's on your side. You just have to make sure you don't hand her a reason to challenge that. Understood, I said. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. Patricia was watching me. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. I thought this would be hard because of the work. I didn't think my own sister would try to destroy me. Patricia's expression softened. People get ugly when money's involved. Especially people who feel entitled to it. But you've got something they don't. What's that? You actually care about this place. That counts for more than you think. I spent the rest of the day buried in paperwork. Henry helped me organize files, showing me where he kept contracts, invoices, medical records for every horse. We labeled everything, cross-referenced dates, created backups on external hard drives. By evening, my eyes burned and my back ached from sitting. But the files were pristine. If Victoria wanted documentation, she'd get it. Every dollar accounted for. Every decision justified. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the look on Mr. Kowalski's face. The certainty in his posture. He thought he could intimidate me. Maybe he thought I was just some naive girl playing rancher. Maybe that's what Victoria told him. The thought made my blood simmer. The next morning, I was up before the sun again. I walked the pastures, checked the water troughs, inspected the fences. The ranch hands arrived at 6, and I met them in the barn to go over the day's tasks. They looked surprised to see me there so early, but no one questioned it. We worked side by side, mucking stalls, distributing feed, moving horses between paddocks. By noon, I was covered in sweat and dirt, my muscles screaming. But I felt alive. Grounded. This was real work. This was what I knew. No amount of legal posturing could take that away from me. Around 2 in the afternoon, a truck pulled up. I didn't recognize it. A man climbed out, older, maybe 60, wearing a weathered cowboy hat and boots that had seen decades of use. He walked toward me with a slight limp, and when he got closer, I saw the name stitched on his jacket. Neil Ashford. I'd heard of him. He was a horse appraiser, one of the most respected in the region. Mr. Ashford, I said, extending a hand. Claire Donovan. I know who you are, he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm. Henry called me a few weeks back. Asked me to come out and do a full appraisal of your stock. Said you might need it for legal purposes. I blinked. He did? Neil nodded. Wanted to make sure you had independent verification of value. Smart man, your mentor. I've been doing this 40 years, and I've never seen a collection like what you've got here. These horses are top tier. Bloodlines, training, temperament. You're sitting on a goldmine. Can I see the appraisal? I asked. He pulled a folder from his truck and handed it over. I flipped through the pages. Each horse was listed individually with photos, pedigree information, and an estimated value. Some were worth $200,000. Others closer to $500,000. The total at the bottom made my head spin. $18.3 million. I looked up. This is accurate? Every number, Neil said. And if anyone challenges it, I'll testify under oath. Henry made sure I knew what was at stake. He said your sister might come after you. Said you'd need all the ammunition you could get. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. He tipped his hat. You take care of these animals, and they'll take care of you. That's all that matters. After he left, I sat on the porch steps with the appraisal in my lap. Henry had thought of everything. He'd anticipated Victoria's move and built a defense before I even knew I needed one. I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to my eyes. Inside, Henry was making lunch. I found him in the kitchen, slicing tomatoes. I held up the folder. You called Neil Ashford. He glanced over, unbothered. Figured you'd need proof. Victoria strikes me as the type who'd claim the horses are worth half what they are just to make you look incompetent. I sat down at the table. How did you know she'd do this? Henry set the knife down. Because I've seen it before. People who think they deserve something will do anything to get it. Lie. Cheat. Manipulate. Your sister's not unique. She's just louder than most. What if she finds something? I asked quietly. What if I mess up and give her an opening? Henry turned to face me fully. Then you fix it. You own the mistake, you learn from it, and you move on. But you don't let fear paralyze you. That's what she's counting on. She wants you to second-guess yourself, to feel like you're in over your head. Don't give her that power. I nodded, trying to absorb his words. He brought 2 plates to the table, sandwiches piled high with turkey and fresh vegetables from the garden. We ate in silence, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees. The horses moved lazily across the pasture, their tails swishing at flies. It was peaceful. Ordinary. And I realized that's what I was fighting for. Not the money. Not the status. Just this. The ability to live a life I'd built with my own hands. That evening, Thomas called. I've got news. Victoria filed a petition to freeze your assets pending an investigation into the legitimacy of the property transfer. What does that mean? I asked, my pulse quickening. It means she's trying to lock you out of your own accounts. Stop you from making any financial decisions regarding the ranch. It's a common tactic. Designed to create chaos and pressure you into settling. Can she do that? Not if I have anything to say about it, Thomas said. I'm filing an emergency motion to deny the petition. We'll have a hearing next week. You'll need to be there. And Claire, you'll need to be prepared to answer questions. About your relationship with Henry. About your qualifications. About your intentions for the ranch. They're going to try to paint you as opportunistic. I'll be ready, I said, though my stomach churned. The week leading up to the hearing was brutal. I barely slept. Every morning I woke up expecting more bad news. Another lawyer at the gate. Another petition filed. But nothing came. Just silence. The kind that felt like a held breath. I threw myself into work. I met with buyers interested in breeding contracts. I scheduled vet visits for routine checkups. I reviewed financial projections with Rachel Novak, the banker who'd worked with Henry for years. She assured me the ranch was solvent, that I had enough reserves to weather any legal storm. But I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew what Victoria was trying to do. And she knew it could work if I wasn't careful. The night before the hearing, I stood in the barn alone. The horses were settling in for the night, their soft breathing filling the space. I walked down the row of stalls, stopping at each one to run my hand along a neck, whisper a name. Maverick leaned into my touch, his eyes half closed. Rosie nickered softly. Thunder huffed and turned away, but I knew it was just his way. These animals trusted me. They depended on me. And I wasn't going to let them down. I pulled out the photograph Henry had given me. The little girl on the pony, dirt on her cheek, pure joy on her face. That girl had believed in something bigger than herself. She believed that love and hard work mattered. That dreams weren't just for people with money or connections. I folded the photo carefully and tucked it back into my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that courtroom and prove her right. The courthouse in Willow Creek was a brick building that smelled like old wood and floor polish. I arrived 30 minutes early, my hands gripping the folder Thomas had prepared for me. Inside were copies of every document we'd need. The property transfer papers. Neil Ashford's appraisal. Medical evaluations proving Henry's mental competency. Bank statements showing the ranch's financial health. Testimonials from ranch hands and buyers. Thomas met me in the hallway, his suit pressed and his expression calm. He put a hand on my shoulder. Remember, answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. Don't get emotional. If you don't know something, say so. Don't guess. I nodded, my throat dry. What if they ask about my qualifications? Then you tell them the truth. 8 years of hands-on experience. You know those horses better than anyone. You've managed schedules, coordinated with vets, handled emergencies. That's not nothing. We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and a single row of fluorescent lights humming overhead. Victoria sat at the front table with Blake beside her. Mr. Kowalski stood near them, shuffling papers. Victoria didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. Blake glanced back once, his expression unreadable, then turned away. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and glasses perched on her nose. Everyone stood. She took her seat and gestured for us to sit as well. Let's begin. This is a hearing regarding a petition to freeze assets related to the estate transfer of Callahan Ranch. Mr. Kowalski, you may proceed. Mr. Kowalski stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, my clients are here today out of genuine concern for both Mr. Henry Callahan and the integrity of his life's work. Mr. Callahan is 83 years old. He has no immediate family. Over the past several months, he transferred ownership of property valued at over $20 million to Ms. Claire Donovan, a woman with no business experience, no formal education in ranch management, and no legal relationship to him beyond employment. My clients believe this transfer was the result of undue influence. That Ms. Donovan exploited her position of trust to manipulate a vulnerable elderly man into signing over his estate. We are requesting that the court freeze all assets related to the ranch pending a full investigation into the circumstances of this transfer. I felt my face flush, anger rising hot and fast. Thomas touched my arm lightly, a silent reminder to stay calm. The judge looked at Mr. Kowalski over her glasses. Do you have evidence of this alleged manipulation? Mr. Kowalski pulled a document from his folder. We have statements from individuals who interacted with Mr. Callahan in the months leading up to the transfer. Several noted that he seemed increasingly reliant on Ms. Donovan. That she was present during meetings with his attorney. That she had access to his financial records. We believe this created an environment where Mr. Callahan felt obligated to reward her, whether or not that was his true intention. The judge turned to Thomas. Mr. Brennan, your response? Thomas stood, his voice steady and clear. Your Honor, this petition is baseless. Mr. Callahan is of sound mind, as evidenced by independent medical evaluations conducted by 3 separate physicians, all of whom confirmed his cognitive capacity. The transfer was executed with full legal oversight. I personally witnessed the signing, as did 2 other independent witnesses. Ms. Donovan did not initiate this transfer. Mr. Callahan did. He chose to leave his property to someone he trusted. Someone who had dedicated nearly a decade of her life to his ranch. There is no evidence of coercion, manipulation, or exploitation. This is simply a case of family members upset that they were not named beneficiaries. Mr. Kowalski interrupted. With all due respect, the fact remains that Ms. Donovan had unprecedented access to Mr. Callahan. She was in a position of power over someone who was isolated and elderly. That alone warrants investigation. Thomas didn't miss a beat. Ms. Donovan was an employee. A valued one. Mr. Callahan was not isolated. He had regular contact with his attorney, his banker, his veterinarian, and numerous business associates. All of whom will testify that he was fully capable of making his own decisions. Furthermore, Mr. Callahan is here today and available to testify if the court wishes to hear directly from him. The judge looked toward the back of the courtroom. Mr. Callahan, are you present? Henry stood from the bench behind us. I am, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Please come forward. Henry walked to the witness stand slowly but steadily. He placed one hand on the Bible and raised the other. After being sworn in, he sat down, his gaze calm and unwavering. Mr. Callahan, the judge began, can you explain in your own words why you transferred ownership of your ranch to Ms. Donovan? Henry cleared his throat. Because she earned it. I've known Claire since she was 16 years old. She started working for me as a stable hand. Over the years, she proved herself to be hardworking, honest, and deeply knowledgeable about horses and ranch operations. She never asked me for anything beyond fair wages. She showed up every day, rain or shine, whether I could pay her on time or not. She cared about my animals and my land in a way that most people don't care about anything anymore. I don't have children. I don't have family that's invested in this life. Claire is the closest thing I have to a daughter. And I wanted to make sure my ranch went to someone who would protect it, not sell it off to the highest bidder. Mr. Kowalski stood. Mr. Callahan, did Ms. Donovan ever suggest that you leave her the property? Never, Henry said firmly. It was entirely my idea. Did she have access to your financial accounts? Only in the capacity of helping me manage bills and payroll. I authorized that access years ago. It was never a secret. Did you feel pressured or obligated to transfer the property to her? Henry's expression hardened. Absolutely not. I made this decision freely and with full awareness of what I was doing. The only pressure I felt was from people trying to convince me to sell the ranch so they could profit from it. Mr. Kowalski's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The judge looked at Victoria. Ms. Donovan, would you like to add anything? Victoria stood, her voice trembling slightly. Your Honor, I just want to make sure my father-in-law wasn't taken advantage of. Claire has always been close to him, and I'm worried that she used that closeness to her advantage. I care deeply about Henry and about preserving his legacy. The judge's expression remained neutral. Mr. Callahan, do you feel Ms. Claire Donovan took advantage of you? Henry looked directly at Victoria. No. The only people who've tried to take advantage of me are sitting at that table. Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. Blake put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. The judge made a note. Mr. Kowalski, do you have any additional evidence to support your claim? Mr. Kowalski hesitated. We're in the process of gathering further documentation, Your Honor. We respectfully request more time to build our case. The judge removed her glasses and set them on the bench. Mr. Kowalski, you've presented no concrete evidence of wrongdoing. You've offered speculation and insinuation, but nothing substantive. Mr. Callahan has testified under oath that the transfer was voluntary and informed. 3 independent physicians have certified his mental competency. The transaction was witnessed and notarized by a licensed attorney. Unless you have evidence of fraud, coercion, or incapacity, I see no grounds to freeze the assets. Your petition is denied. The courtroom was silent. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. Thomas squeezed my shoulder lightly. Mr. Kowalski gathered his papers, his face tight. Your Honor, we intend to file a formal complaint with the State Bar regarding Mr. Brennan's conduct in facilitating this transfer. The judge's expression turned cold. You're welcome to do that, Mr. Kowalski. But I'd advise you to be very certain of your claims before you make accusations against a member of this court's bar. Understood? Mr. Kowalski nodded stiffly. Understood. The judge stood. This hearing is adjourned. Everyone rose. Victoria turned and walked out without a word, Blake following close behind. Mr. Kowalski lingered for a moment, then left as well. I stood there, my legs shaking, barely able to process what had just happened. Thomas turned to me, a small smile on his face. You did good. I didn't do anything, I said. Henry did. Thomas shook his head. You showed up. You prepared. You didn't panic. That's more than most people can manage. Henry stepped down from the witness stand and walked over. How do you feel? Terrified, I admitted. Good, he said. Means you're taking it seriously. Now let's get out of here and go check on those horses. We walked out into the midday sun. The air was crisp, the sky impossibly blue. I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But I knew this wasn't over. Victoria wouldn't stop just because a judge denied her petition. She'd regroup. She'd find another angle. People like her always did. On the drive back to the ranch, Henry was quiet. I glanced over at him. You okay? He nodded. Just thinking about how proud I am of you. I felt my throat tighten. I haven't done anything yet. You stood your ground, he said. That's everything. When we got back, the ranch was exactly as we'd left it. The horses grazing. The barn doors open. The mountains in the distance standing silent and eternal. I walked to the fence and leaned against it, watching Maverick roll in the dirt. Henry joined me. You know she's not done, I said quietly. I know. What do I do? You keep running this place the way it's meant to be run. You build relationships. You prove you're the right person for this. And when she comes at you again, because she will, you'll be ready. I looked at him. How do you know I'll be ready? Because you've already survived the hardest part, he said. You believed in yourself when no one else did. That's the foundation. Everything else is just details. That evening, I sat in the office going through the ranch's financial records. Rachel Novak had sent over updated projections, and I wanted to make sure I understood every line item. The expenses were significant. Feed, veterinary care, insurance, payroll, maintenance. But the income was solid. Breeding contracts, sales, training fees. The ranch was profitable, but not by a huge margin. There was no room for error. One bad year, one major injury, one lawsuit, and it could all come crashing down. I thought about Victoria's accusation. That I didn't have the experience to manage this. Part of me wondered if she was right. Not about the manipulation, but about the risk. What if I made a mistake? What if I trusted the wrong buyer or missed a health issue with one of the horses? What if I failed? I heard footsteps behind me. Henry stood in the doorway. You're overthinking. I let out a shaky laugh. How can you tell? Because you've got that look. The one you used to get before competitions. Like you're trying to predict every possible thing that could go wrong. I rubbed my eyes. What if I can't do this? Henry walked over and sat in the chair across from me. You want the truth? Always. You might fail. You might make mistakes. You might lose money or have to make hard decisions. But you'll figure it out. Because that's what people like us do. We don't have trust funds or safety nets. We just have grit. And that's enough. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the fear was still there, coiled tight in my chest. The next morning, I woke to a loud banging on the front door. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and pulled on a sweatshirt. When I opened the door, a man in a suit stood there holding a clipboard. "Are you Claire Donovan?" "Yes." "You've been served." He handed me a thick envelope and walked away before I could respond. I stood there in the doorway, staring at the envelope. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside were legal documents. A lawsuit. Victoria and Blake were suing me for breach of fiduciary duty, alleging that I had manipulated Henry into changing his estate plan for personal gain. They were seeking damages in the amount of $22 million. The exact value of the ranch. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. I sank onto the porch steps, the papers scattered around me. This wasn't just a petition. This was war. Henry appeared in the doorway. "What's wrong?" I handed him the papers without speaking. He read through them slowly, his expression darkening. Then he sat down beside me. "We knew this was coming." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But seeing it in writing." Henry put an arm around my shoulders. "You're not alone in this. We've got Thomas. We've got documentation. We've got the truth. She can throw all the lawsuits she wants. It doesn't change the facts." "But what if the facts aren't enough?" I asked. "What if a jury decides I'm just some opportunist who took advantage of you? Then we'll appeal. And we'll keep fighting until there's no fight left." I leaned against him, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. For the first time since this all started, I let myself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Just quiet tears that slipped down my cheeks and soaked into Henry's flannel shirt. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, solid and steady, while I fell apart. The trial took 6 months to reach the courtroom. 6 months of depositions, document requests, and sleepless nights. Thomas built our defense methodically, interviewing every person who'd worked with Henry over the past decade. Dr. Patricia Wells testified about my dedication to the horses. Neil Ashford presented his appraisal and explained why the ranch was worth every penny. Rachel Novak walked the jury through financial records proving the ranch was thriving under my management. Every ranch hand testified that I worked harder than anyone they'd known. Even buyers from 3 states away sent affidavits confirming I'd negotiated fair deals and maintained Henry's reputation for integrity. Victoria's lawyers tried everything. They brought in an expert who claimed Henry showed signs of cognitive decline. Thomas destroyed him on cross-examination with medical records showing Henry had passed every competency test. They suggested I'd isolated Henry from his family. Thomas produced phone logs showing Victoria had called twice in 3 years, both times asking about money. They implied the ranch was failing under my watch. Thomas presented profit margins that had actually improved since I took over. By the end, their case was shredded. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. "We find in favor of the defendant, Claire Donovan, on all counts." Victoria's face went white. Blake stared at the floor. Mr. Kowalski gathered his papers in silence. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed the case. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I didn't say much, just that I was grateful and ready to get back to work. Henry stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, and that said everything that needed saying. 3 months later, I stood in the pasture at sunset watching the horses run. The ranch was mine, truly and completely. No lawsuits. No threats. Just land and animals and work that mattered. Henry had moved into a smaller cottage on the property, insisting I take the main house. We still had coffee every morning, still walked the fence lines together. But now when people asked who owned Callahan Ranch, the answer was simple. Claire Donovan. I thought about Victoria sometimes. About the sister who'd told me I'd never own anything. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Blake had separated. That her business ventures weren't going well. Part of me felt sorry for her. But mostly I felt free. Free from her judgment. Free from her shadow. Free to build something that was entirely my own. I started a program for young people who wanted to learn horsemanship. Kids from towns like the one I grew up in, who loved animals but couldn't afford lessons. They came on weekends, mucked stalls, learned to ride, discovered that dreams weren't reserved for people with money. I saw myself in their faces. The wonder. The determination. The belief that hard work could change everything. And I made sure they knew they belonged here. That this ranch was as much theirs as it was mine. One morning, a girl no older than 10 stood at the fence watching Maverick. She had dirt on her cheek and hope in her eyes. I walked over and handed her an apple. Want to feed him? She nodded, speechless. I lifted her onto the fence rail and showed her how to hold her hand flat. Maverick took the apple gently, and the girl laughed, pure and bright. That sound carried across the pasture, and I realized this was what Henry had given me. Not just property. Not just horses. But the chance to pass something forward. To prove that the girl who mucked stalls could become the woman who owned the ranch. And that she could open the gate for others to follow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.